a man was found dead on an Australian beach. Before anyone found him, someone had already erased him. No name, no identity. Only questions that still haven't been answered. On the 1st of December 1948, a man was found sitting against a seawall on an Adelaide beach. Well-dressed, freshly shaven, an unlit cigarette resting on his collar, as if he'd meant to smoke it and simply never got around to it. No wallet, no name, every tag cut from his clothes. 74 years would pass before anyone learned who he was. And even then, the two words found sewn into his pocket still don't fully make sense. I am Lady Moonveil. Every case on this desk started the same way, ordinary, right up until it wasn't. This is the Somerton Man. Somerton Beach sits just south of Adelaide, a quiet, ordinary stretch of sand where families came to swim and old men came to sit with the paper. Nothing about the place suggested anything was wrong with the world. But Adelaide in December of 1948 wasn't quite as ordinary as it looked. A few hundred miles north at a place called Woomera, the British and Australian governments had just opened a rocket testing range, one of the most closely watched military projects in the region. The Cold War hadn't announced itself loudly yet. It had just quietly begun unfolding. I want you to hold both of those images at once. A public beach full of ordinary evenings, and a government project secretive enough that its very existence made foreign intelligence services take an interest in this part of the country. Whatever happened on that beach happened in a city already learning how to keep secrets. We don't know his name, not yet. So let's start with what we could see. A man somewhere between 40 and 45, tall, grey-eyed, fair hair, going grey at the sides, in excellent physical condition, no scars, no calluses, none of the wear you'd expect on a man who worked with his hands. His calves were unusually developed. Investigators noted it and couldn't explain it, the kind of detail that suggested a life or a profession they could never quite identify. His ears carried something rarer still, an extremely uncommon structure found in only a small fraction of people, not something you'd notice across a room, only something a pathologist would find later, with time and a careful eye. He was dressed well, a white shirt, a red and white tie, a double-breasted jacket, polished shoes. Someone had taken care getting dressed that morning. And then later, investigators would discover something stranger than any of it. Every label had been cut from his clothing, every single one. Not torn off in a hurry, removed carefully. From every garment he wore, someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to erase him. We can trace some of that final day, though only in fragments. A train ticket bought that morning for Henley Beach, a ticket he never used, a suitcase checked into the cloakroom at Adelaide Station sometime before midday, then left there, a bus ticket purchased separately, taking him toward Glenelg instead. By early evening, he was on the sand at Somerton Beach. A local couple walking the shore around 7 noticed him lying on the sand. He raised his right arm, high in the air, then let it fall. They assumed he was drunk or asleep. People do lie down on beaches in the evening. By 10 o'clock, another couple passed the same spot. He hadn't moved. Mosquitoes gathered at his face. They joked quietly that he might be dead, but they didn't check. It's a strange thing, imagining how many people walked near him that night, each one deciding in their own small way that it wasn't their business to look closer. The same man who'd seen him in the evening before came back the next morning for an early swim. He was still there, same position, head against the seawall, legs out straight, feet crossed at the ankle. The posture of someone resting, not of someone who might be dead. The cigarette was still balanced on his collar, unsmoked. He was cold. He'd likely been gone for hours. There was no violence on the body, no wound, no sign of a struggle. His pockets held small, ordinary things. A comb, a heavy empty pack of gum, a tin of cigarettes with a different, pricier brand hidden inside it, and a box of matches. Nothing that told anyone who he was. Whatever had happened to him, it hadn't announced itself. It had simply arrived, quietly on a public beach, in a full view of a city that never noticed until it was already over. Months passed, the body, unclaimed, was examined more closely by a pathologist named John Cleland. He found the man's spleen swollen far beyond normal, his stomach lined with the kind of damage that suggested poisoning. He believed with real confidence that this had not been a natural death. But no poison was ever found, not one trace, in the blood, in the stomach, or anywhere else. Then in April of 1949, 4 months after the body was found, Cleland went back through the men's trousers one more time. And in a small pocket sewn inside the waistband, so well hidden that it had been missed entirely, he found a tiny scrap of rolled paper. 2 words were printed on it, Tamám Shud. Persian, torn from the final page of a rare edition of Rubaiyat of Umar Khayyam, a centuries-old collection of poetry about fate, mortality, and the passing of time. A man with no name, found on a beach with no explanation, carrying two words that mean nothing else but this: Tamám Shud. It's over. It's finished. A local man eventually came forward. He'd found a copy of that exact book, missing its final page, thrown into the backseat of his unlocked car around the same time the body was discovered. On the inside back cover, faint pencil marks, a telephone number leading investigators to a nurse named Jessica Thompson, who lived not far from the beach, and beneath it, 5 lines of capital letters, a code that has never in over 70 years been solved. Jessica Thompson was shown a plaster cast made of the dead man's face. She said she didn't recognize him, but the detectives in the room noted something else. She looked, they said, like she might faint. She never looked at the cast again, and she asked specifically that her name be kept out of the official record. There's one more detail researchers have returned to since. Jessica Thompson had a son. According to some who examined him later in life, Robin's ears carried that same rare structure found in the Somerton men's autopsy. The same unusual dental traits too. Nobody has ever confirmed what that means. It's never been treated as evidence of anything in any official sense. It's simply sat there for decades as one detail that shouldn't line up. I'll let you decide what to do with that. I'm not sure the researchers who found it have decided either. For 70 years, that was as far as the case went. A man with no name. A woman who knew something she never said. A code no one could break. Then in 2022, researchers extracted DNA from hair still caught in that old plaster cast. It pointed to a family tree in Melbourne, to a man named Carl Webb, an instrument maker, an amateur poet, born in 1905. Which would have made him exactly the right age. A man who had vanished from public record in 1947, not long after his wife filed for divorce. It's the name most of the evidence now points toward, but it doesn't answer everything. So what actually happened to him? A few explanations have been offered, each with real evidence behind it, and each with something that still doesn't sit right. The first is the simplest, and the one the DNA supports. A man, Carl Webb, estranged from his wife, traveled to find her, and alone, worn down, far from anyone who knew him, ended his life on that beach. It would explain a great deal. His brother-in-law's surname was Kian, which matches the initials stitched into his belongings. He wrote poetry. He'd have had access through his work to compounds most people never touched. But it doesn't explain why a man ending his own life would go to the trouble of removing every label from every piece of clothing he owned. Grief doesn't usually reach for scissors. The second theory looks toward Wumra, an intelligence operative, someone caught in the quiet edges of a Cold War that hadn't yet gone public, silenced with something that left no trace in an autopsy. It would explain the missing labels, the unbreakable code, the total absence of identity. But no government in over 70 years has ever acknowledged him. And an instrument maker from Melbourne is, by most measures, an unlikely spy. The third theory turns toward the port. Adelaide moved goods in and out by sea, and some believed the code and the unusual imported materials in his suitcase were part of something closer to smuggling than espionage. But that theory struggles to explain the one thing that never fits neatly into any of them. Why a dying or a doomed man would carry 2 words of Persian poetry against his herd and nothing else in the world to say who he was. Here's what stays with me about this one. We have a name now. Most of the evidence agrees on it. And still somehow the mystery hasn't closed. Because a name doesn't explain the labels, cut so carefully from every piece of clothing he wore that it could only have been intentional. It doesn't explain the code, sitting on the back of that book, unread for 70 years and likely to stay that way. And it doesn't explain Jessica Thompson, a woman who never admitted to knowing him, and a detail about her son that no one has ever managed to either prove or let go of. Some things in this case were never meant to be confirmed. What we do have is an image, exactly as it was left. A well-dressed man, at rest against a seawall, facing the water, his shoes polished, his cigarette unsmoked, 2 words in his pocket, in a language he probably never spoke aloud in his life. Tamám Shud. Ended. Finished. Or perhaps those 2 words were never meant for us at all. The tide erased every footprint around him before the morning was over. It never erased the questions. Tell me what you think he was carrying besides that poem. I'll be here next time with another one that doesn't quite close. Good night.